Well, good morning, everybody. This is the news that we are waking up to for Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. That's day 1134 of Russia's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and we'll start out with last night's missile and drone attacks. We saw 74 drones come in last night, which is less than half the average that we've been seeing. And that's after a night with no drones at all. Now, the interception rate was only 82%. Now, again, I say only, right? That's an incredible interception rate. However, it is less than we have come to expect. And I'm wondering why we've been seeing this lately. Interception rates in the 70 and 80% ranges, where normally the UAF has a 90% or better interception rate. So why? It could be a change in Russian tactics. For example, last night, Kyiv was swarmed with drones. A far larger percentage of the 74 drones went to Kyiv than went anywhere else. And Kyiv is on fire today. Right, it's not a good situation. At least 55 people are injured, 5 of them children. And I have not had any reports of deaths at this time. But with 55 people hospitalized, you know that could change today by the time we get to the live tonight. So at any rate, 41 shot down, 20 taken out with active countermeasures for an 82% interception rate. Now, today, and it concerns me a little bit, because today is Liberation Day for Kyiv. It was on this day, April 2nd, 2022, just 5 weeks after the full-scale invasion, that we saw this entire area in green, just north of Kyiv, the Russian presence expelled from the country and the region declared liberated. I remember this time. I remember when this happened. I remember watching that 41-mile-long column of armor that never moved again once it stopped, and the Ukrainians just picking them off one by one. The stories of the battle for Hostomel, right? The Battle of Kyiv, the liberation of Irpin and Bucha, and then finally the Russians pushed back across the Belarusian border, where, with the complicity of Lukashenko, they had launched their invasion into Ukraine. Why it concerns me, and we'll talk more about this in just a moment, is because Donald Trump is calling this Liberation Day in the United States. And we'll talk about that in just 1 second. Let's look at this first. Now, the Kyiv Post, Reuters, AP, they're all reporting the same thing. Putin is frustrated. Trump is frustrated with Putin over the slow progress toward a ceasefire in Ukraine and is now considering tougher sanctions. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. You know what I think. I think Donald Trump is firmly in Putin's pocket. And any kind of discussion of this frustration with Putin, or I'm losing my patience with Putin, is sheer political theater of a political creature that is indemnified to another. We can only hope that something like this is true and that Donald might just do the right thing in Ukraine. I don't see it happening. I do not have a lot of hope for it. Now, the White House briefing, Liberation Day for tariffs. Now, first, let's hear what she has to say about
last night, and that is he is frustrated with leaders on both sides of this war. He wants this war to end. There are men that are dying on both sides, and it's been going on for far too long. Our team continues to be engaged with the Russians as we are with the Ukrainians, and the president continues to be very, very much engaged on this topic every single day. Sure.
So there's the message of frustration straight from the White House press secretary's mouth, right? Now, again, and she may well believe it. I do not. I absolutely do not. Frustrated with both sides. It's taking too long. Look, peace at any cost is not peace. It's appeasement. There aren't two sides to this story. Donald Trump's complete lack of a moral compass and his transactional nature with everything doesn't care that Putin is a murdering, genocidal lunatic hell-bent on recreating an imperial Russia with himself as God Emperor. Because Trump is doing the same thing in America. So he does not care. Now, what his plans in America are and why he's calling this Liberation Day is because today is the day he's going to announce all the blanket tariffs on everyone in the world. This is insanity. Unless you accept the basic premise that Donald Trump is following the post-USSR oligarchs' playbook for wrecking the economy and making him and his friends the only rich people there are. Now, why would I say such a thing? Well, one of the core tenets, and the Russians are doing it again now. I mean, they claim that they're not, right? But this looks a lot like what they did in the post-USSR world. Drive down the value of the currency. Make everything more expensive for everyone. Make people work harder for what they have. The only people who stay rich in a situation like this where the currency is devaluing are the super rich. And what do? They buy everything up at cheap discounts, pennies on the dollar once the economy is wrecked. They also make sure that national industries get privatized. Oh, sure, I'll take all those power plants for myself. Why wouldn't I? Trump wants to sell off the National Weather Service to private industry, privatize the post office so that him and his oligarch friends can grift the whole country and government supplies no services to us whatsoever. It abandons us as a permanent underclass that can be bought and sold like any other commodity, manipulated and disposed of by the rich in any way they see fit. This is the post-Soviet playbook of the Russian oligarchs. They wrecked their own economy so they could buy it all cheap and divvy it up between themselves. And Trump is doing the same thing to the United States of America. Make no mistake, we all know what tariffs are. We all know what they do. They are inflationary by their nature. He is wrecking our standing in the world and our currency as the world's choice of reserve currency on the orders of Vladimir Putin to drive a wedge between the United States and our allies who are Russia's enemies in their minds, right? The big squeeze is coming. Imperial America and Imperial Russia squeezing Europe into vassal states to their spheres of influence and competing or divvying up the Arctic resources that are increasingly becoming available as climate change boils this planet. And Trump now is trying to sell climate change as a good thing. Oh, think about it. Your heating bills will be so much less. Holy shit. Now, as an indication of just how panicked people are ahead of this tariff announcement today that Trump is supposed to make, gold hit all-time highs. According to all the gold indices, gold surged to a record of 3,148.88 per troy ounce yesterday. That's a 19% gain since the beginning of the year. What happens when people are scared? They buy gold. Gold will always have value. They're afraid that their money is going to be devalued, and well, they should be, because it is clearly the president's agenda to devalue the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It is clearly his agenda. Everything he is doing will lead to that inevitable outcome. So this is not a good economic sign for anybody. If the wealthiest people in the world are turning to gold en masse at the highest price that it's ever been at, we should have concerns around that. We should have concerns about that. Now, we did hear something like an intelligence statement from a member of the administration.
We do know that I think there was an idea from Russia about a temporary administration that was not appreciated by the president. Ukraine is, well, I don't think I need to remind everyone, but it's a good reminder, is a constitutional democracy. Governance in Ukraine is determined by its constitution and the Ukrainian people. We are committed to the diplomacy necessary to achieve a full ceasefire and to bring the parties to the negotiating table for a final and lasting settlement. President Trump has made clear that Russia and Ukraine need to move to a full ceasefire now. None of that has changed.
Now, she recognizes the sovereignty of Ukraine, dismisses Putin's demands for a change in government before he'll talk to them, and indicates that the president who has led a smear campaign against Zelensky is now offended that Putin would suggest that Zelensky is illegitimate. The somersaults of logic that one has to do to try to keep up with Donald Trump are not worth it. They're not worth it at all. This woman is pretty clear. I wonder if she's a Trump appointee. She seems competent, very competent. However, at the end there, she does take the rather authoritarian tone with Russia and Ukraine that they have to do what the United States is saying. And that's a fundamentally arrogant position to take that denies the sovereignty of both nations. Look, neither one of these nations is going to stop. Russia can't stop. They are stuck with the theory of sunk costs, right? The logical fallacy that you put so much into a thing, you shouldn't cut your losses and leave. You should double down and stick it out. There are times where that pays off. This is not going to be one of them, because the Ukrainian people refuse to surrender their own sovereignty to the aggressor nation. Now, I want to take a look at this here. First of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. This comes from Ukraine News TV, Juzzy, who did all the work, and I'm very grateful to him for the work he did. So he took all the best OSINT, open source intelligence data that we had about how many units of tanks and artillery did Russia claim to have before the war, and then how much is verified lost in Ukraine, and then take the losses that we believe are real and express them as a percentage of the total stockpile. It's an amazing piece of work. And I want to point out to everybody a couple of critical things here. Now, we talked yesterday about how desperate Russia is for people, that they are now sending military police into gyms and nightclubs to get everybody's papers and conscript anybody that's eligible, right? In Moscow and Petersburg. That is a change that could have stunning ramifications for the Kremlin, because it's a political issue in the two cities that matter in Russia. Until now, he could conscript all the Burat people he wanted, all the Bashkiris, all the Dagestanis, right? He could conscript them, nobody cared. But start getting the sons of Mother Russia out of Petersburg and Moscow, they're likely to care. So we looked yesterday at how Russia's got a problem with recruitment. They lost 41,000 men in Ukraine last month, but were only able to recruit about 28,500. So there is a big gap there, 12,000 men. The front line is short of this month over last month. And that's been the case for 5 months or something like it, about that, right? That's going to prove to be a problem, and why the North Koreans were so necessary. Look at the tank losses. Over 66, almost 67% of all tanks. And here's the problem for Russia. That counts the tanks that are in storage, but have been reduced to a pile of rust and will never be a tank again. So what percentage of the maybe 23% that are left are even salvageable? Russia's running out of tanks. Look at the light armored infantry vehicles. Is it any wonder, with almost 72% of them destroyed in Ukraine, that Russia's running assaults in Ladas and on e-bikes and whatever guys can get their hands on? It's no wonder at all. Artillery systems. Look at the artillery systems, rapidly approaching 70%. And here's the thing. The barrel replacements, Russia's having a real hard time with them. They're going through, right, you can only shoot out of a standard howitzer about 2,000 rounds before the barrel has to be replaced. If you keep going, that barrel is going to explode on you and kill your gunners. So artillery is approaching 70%. Now again, that includes the rust buckets that will never fire a shot that are in storage and still on the books. What percentage of what's left can even be retooled? Russia is at its weakest point in its recent history. And by recent history, I mean 120 years. Now is the time for Europe to act and support Ukraine and eliminate the Russian threat. Because right now, Russia's got America in bed with it, much to my chagrin. And I am so grateful I am in Ukraine during this time. I wouldn't make it in the United States. No way. No way. I'd be in jail already. All right. So artillery systems. Let's take a look at artillery systems, because last month in March, the Ukrainian military destroyed a record 1,644 Russian artillery systems, including 122 on March 27th alone. Holy shit. Now that's a 50% increase over this time last year. From January through March, the first quarter of last year, the Ukrainians destroyed about 2,600 systems. This year, it's about 3,900, almost 4,000 systems in the same period. A 50% increase. That's according to the General Staff of Ukraine. But boy, there's a lot of evidence for it. There's video on the internet of drones hitting artillery all over the front line every single day. It's the drone warfare. The drones are taking out the tanks. The drones are taking out the APCs. Drones are taking out the Ladas. Drones are taking out towed artillery and self-propelled artillery. They're taking it all out. Russia's god of war is losing to Ukraine's unmanned aerial vehicles. And there's a lesson for us all in that. This war is redefining modern conflict, and everybody should be paying attention, especially anybody with sons who are concerned about future warfare. Because if we don't deal with the Russian threat right now, it's going to come for all of us. There's no two ways about it. They've said as much. Listen, guys. Yeah, I'm going to break here because this is a long one, and my recording software only lets me do a half an hour, and I feel like we're coming up on 20 minutes at least. So I'm going to break here, and there'll be a part 2 published separately. Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about Russia running out of tanks, armored personnel carriers, recruits. What else is Russia running out of? They're running out of people. The population in Russia has been steadily declining since the post-Soviet era. If we take a look here, you can see these numbers over here on the far right are in thousands. So 500,000 people, 1 million people, 1.5 million people in lost population. Now, you look back at the Soviet times, right, and the population is just dropping every year by anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million people for almost 10 years, for 10 years straight. Why? Because the USSR was the most evil experiment in artificially manufacturing human beings and society that the world has ever seen. Nobody wants to live in a police state. It was and remains the greatest failure in architecting human society that the world has ever seen. Period. End of conversation. The new Russian gangster model is just as much a failure. Nobody wants to live in a world where they are owned by the state. It's just that simple. And so despite the fact that Russia had this vast superiority in numbers and in hardware that it had inherited from its Soviet past, little Ukraine is kicking their ass. It has denied them Kyiv, it has denied them victory, and every day Ukraine advances in the world while Russia devolves. That's what we're watching happen out there. Now, we can express this trend in a very telling form, the standard population pyramid. Now, a population pyramid is called that because it should look like this. This is the world population. It's roughly split between men and women. And when we look at the age groups, there are far more young people under 50 than there are old people over 50, right? The folks who are having children and their children make up the bulk of the population. This is not the case in Russia anymore. Their population chart is looking more and more like an inverted pyramid, where there are fewer and fewer young people to replace the older people. And the burden of those pensions on the society, that there are more people now retiring in Russia or just about at retirement age than there are people working. That's a demographic crisis that is looming for Russia, and one of the reasons it needs to be a parasite in the world. The kleptocracy is not a recipe for growth. And so the only thing they can do is parasitize their neighbors. And that's exactly what we're seeing in Ukraine. It's a crime. It's a sin. It's a shame. But it is inevitable. It is the inevitable reality of a failed police state, the very dystopian future that Trump is trying to bring to the United States in his corporate oligarch form. Now, the Russians aren't just losing population, recruits, tanks, its army, the APCs, the artillery. They're losing land inside of Ukraine. Now, this is my favorite map, right? Those areas in pink, that's from the initial invasion in either 2014 in Crimea or in 2022, right? Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. The dark red areas are the areas that Russia took in 2024, the whole year. That's their whole year of advances. It amounts to less than 0.1% of Ukraine. And it cost them 427,000 men. 427,000 men for that little bit of Ukraine. At the current rate of expenditure, it will take Russia 120 years and 60 million men to take Ukraine. That's not sustainable. That is not sustainable in any way. And more to the point, what they took is slowly being chipped away from them. Over the last few weeks, we have seen the Ukrainians start to mount these counteroffensives, these probing attacks in force, and they're having results. We've seen the town of Kotlin, Pishani, Dachenska, and Lysivska, as well as the town of Uspanivka, all retaken from the Russians in the last few weeks. And this is only in the Pokrovsk direction. We're seeing the same thing, the chip away at other points in the front as well. That blue box over there, that's where the Great Lada attack came from. All those civilian cars, 2 columns of civilian cars that tried to assault Uspanivka. One of them was that aquamarine car that I showed you yesterday that was tangled in the barbed wire. That's where that happened. There were no survivors. You know, you attack in unprotected cars, and you have to take a road that's like 7 kilometers where the drones can target you the whole way. I mean, it's no wonder that the Russian losses are what they are, and the results are so pitiable. It's pitiful. Now, I did want to touch on this in some international news now. This whole thing in Lithuania doesn't make any sense with those 4 American servicemen. 3 of them were found inside their M88 armored vehicle at the bottom of a swampy fen, and 1 guy is missing. How does that make any sense? If the hatches couldn't be open, if they were trapped in there, then all 4 of them should be in there. If the hatch was open and 1 guy could escape, then all of them should have escaped. Or if not escaped, gotten out of the vehicle. So there is something very, and I don't know, maybe there is a simple explanation. But it seems very peculiar to me that 3 of those servicemen are dead inside the vehicle, and the vehicle's at the bottom of a lake, basically a swamp, and the other guy is missing. I mean, that's it. I'll tell you honestly, to me, it's reminiscent of that helicopter pilot that flew into Ukraine with his Russian helicopter and then took out the 2 guys that were with him who didn't want to defect, and then he defected to Ukraine. It sounds like the opposite to me. That guy is only 6 miles from the Belarusian border. I mean, I don't know, right? Is it possible that Belarusian agents were in Lithuania, took 1 guy prisoner, executed the others, put their thing in the swamp? Could be. We really just don't know, and nobody is telling us anything, except that they are still hunting for the 4th man. Continually, the Ukrainians are arresting traitors and saboteurs. So this guy here is a Russian, he's a Ukrainian, but he fled to Russia during the full-scale invasion, worked for another Ukraine, which is a Russian propaganda channel that says that there is no Ukraine, that Ukraine is Russia, yada, yada. He was in Poland for some reason, and the Poles alerted the Ukrainians, and in a joint operation, they took him into custody. He'll be returned home to Ukraine to face charges for his treachery. Finally, in the news and international news, I want to highlight the filibuster speech of Cory Booker, The senator took to the podium for over 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken. It's the longest record for a floor speech, and it beat out that racist motherfucker Strom Thurmond, who stayed on the floor defending the South from civil rights. I mean, how great that the longest floor speech in history now is one imploring fellow senators to take note of the crimes of Donald Trump, the high crimes and misdemeanors of this motherfucker who is pretending to be the president of the United States, all the while trying to destroy the United States. So well done, Senator Booker. Oh, actually, yeah, let me play that because it's a great line. Oops, sorry. I forgot it was video.
I want to go a little bit past this, and then I'm gonna deal with some of the biological urgencies I'm feeling.
And done not just with passion, but with humor. There's a guy to pay attention to. Now, again, I need a vacation. Amsterdam is a very expensive city, but friends of mine are going to be there. And going away by yourself is not a lot of fun. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for me. And I'm really grateful to the people who are helping me to realize it. They include Arn, Larry Nelson, Dave H., Jan O., Dave T., and Margaret H. And not everybody is a Patreon subscriber, so some of these guys won't even see this. But thanks to them, my travel is paid for, and I have some pocket money. Again, tickets to Boom Chicago are 33 euros a piece, and with the service charge. And Amsterdam is a very expensive city. I'm going to have $200 in cabs, even though my buddy Martin is putting me up. Which, if he weren't, if I didn't have a place to stay, I would not even be considering this. But I do. And thanks very much to Arn, who covered my bus tickets, which I really appreciated. I am going to spend, I think it's 36 hours on the bus each way. But I get to stop in Berlin and I think Hanover, and I get to see Europe from the windows. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be a good experience. It's going to be a good experience. And I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to come back refreshed and ready to get back at it with all new vigor. That's my hope anyway. So I could still use some help with that if anybody is so inclined. Everybody that helps with the vacation will have videos made on vacation dedicated to them. And my sincere gratitude. Thank you. I do want to welcome to the Patreon. We've had 3 new members recently. JJ Klepper, which honestly, JJ, I got to tell you, I was a little disappointed because I saw your name and I'm like, oh, is that Jordan Klepper? And of course, you're not Jordan Klepper. But Jordan Klepper is an American satirist, political satirist, for whom I have the highest regard. The guy's brilliant, the way he deals with the maggots. So as his namesake, welcome to the Patreon. I appreciate it. FDL, welcome to the Patreon. Thank you. And Michael Baker, particularly welcome. Michael joined at the Sea Babies level, which means he'll get a video sponsorship every month, regardless of anything else. And because he joined before the 15th, he will get one for April. That's like my rule of thumb cutoff, guys, the 15th, because a lot of times I don't see these for a few days. And as we wind down to the end of the month, it's better to just start fresh the next month, I think. And usually I have other sponsorships too. So welcome aboard, Michael, and expect to see a video dedication sometime on TikTok before this week is out, probably. I try to wrap those up always the first week of the month. All right, thanks, guys. Oh, I saw this. I thought this was hysterical. When you order a Zelensky from Temu. Funny how he's dressing after he ran his mouth at Zelensky, huh? Yeah, these fucking guys. Anyway, guys, thanks to everybody who helped me with my temporary residency permit and who are helping me take a vacation. I really appreciate it. And I will see everybody in the live tonight. Thanks.